You're watching Saturday Agenda with our focus today on education, and joining me now, the Parliamentary Secretary for Schools, Kelvin Thomson, standing in for the Education Minister, Bill Shorten. Thanks for your time today, Kelvin.
Good morning, David.
Queensland is demanding more than $600 million in extra funding in order to get them to sign on the dotted line for these education reforms. Can the government actually offer them that sort of money?
Well, David, I'm not going to provide a running commentary on negotiations. They're obviously a work in progress, but we have offered the Queensland Government some $2.5 billion in extra funding over the course of the next 6 years, and it's noteworthy that the President of the Queensland Primary Principals Association today gave a glowing report to both our offer and the fact that the Queensland Government was prepared to engage in negotiations with us. I think it's very encouraging that they're engaging in negotiations with us and are looking at entering into the Better Schools plan, because I think that's what parents and teachers right around Australia want. They don't want the negative sort of stuff that we heard, and muddled and confused stuff that we heard from the opposition before. What they want is a positive plan for better schools.
So you've got that money on the table, but you had money on the table for WA, for the ACT and for South Australia, and ended up offering them more money as well. Is that fair? Is it fair to states like New South Wales that signed on and then don't get that additional money?
What is fair, David, is that we produce a needs-based funding policy for children right around Australia, based on the schooling resource standard, where each child will be funded to get them up to a standard which will improve our reading, our literacy, our maths, our science, our proficiency in Asian languages, and where the Commonwealth is prepared to spend $10 billion over the course of the next 6 years to achieve that outcome, and to lift the funding for schools on average by $1.5 million. So schools right around Australia are going to benefit from this, and this has been acknowledged by the Independent Schools Council this week, and it's being acknowledged right around the country, both by the states that have signed up already and through states such as Queensland and Victoria being prepared to continue negotiations with us.
Well, one of the demands that the Victorian Premier Denis Napthine has made is that he'll only sign up to the reforms if amendments are made to the legislation to protect the autonomy of Victorian schools. Does the government have any scope to actually change that legislation if Parliament returns?
Well, again, David, I'm not going to provide a running commentary on negotiations, but we are respectful of the role of the states in administering schools and administering education. This is not about a Commonwealth takeover of education. Indeed, we want to see schools have considerable autonomy in the way that they go about lifting standards for students, providing our children with opportunities, getting the focus on maths and science and on Asian languages. So we want to see schools enjoying autonomy, and we are happy to talk with the Victorian Government, the Victorian Premier, about these issues.
Well, putting the negotiations aside, just the question about whether it's actually possible for the government to change this legislation, because Tony Abbott says you can't.
Well, parliaments can always change legislation, but I don't want to get into the detail of negotiations.
Okay.
I do want to say that we are keen to work with the Victorian Government, with the Queensland Government and remaining governments, because we think that parents and children and teachers in those states should not miss out on the substantial extra funding which is coming as a result of the Better Schools plan. Sure.
So you're confident at this point that Victoria and Queensland, potentially the Northern Territory as well, will sign on to this?
Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that the negotiations are continuing. I'm encouraged by the statements made by the Queensland Premier and Education Minister and by the Victorian Premier and Education Minister. And the fact is that bodies like the Independent Schools Council and the Queensland Primary Principals Association are endorsing the extra funding and the Better Schools plan. So I think it does have considerable momentum, and I think it'd be great if everyone got on board to make it happen, because frankly our children and our teachers and our schools need this.
I asked Christopher Pyne about this British idea of free schools, where the government funds schools set up by parents and the community but doesn't actually run them. Is that something that Labor would consider leading up to the election?
Well, we've been engaged in discussions with the various states about the way in which schools function, and we don't intend to do anything. We're not in a position to do anything without the agreement and support and involvement of the states. But we're looking to have considerable autonomy for schools so that they are able to focus on the students who need the assistance, and they're able to give assistance to students who are performing better too in areas like performing arts and creative arts. But we also want to have transparency and accountability as part of the deal. It is important that Australia lifts its educational standards and opportunities and outcomes. One of the findings of the review of funding for schools were that Australia has been slipping down the international list in terms of outcomes on literacy and maths and science and the like. We want to see Australia in the top 5 countries by 2025 in terms of outcomes in maths and science and literacy, and so the steps that we are going to take over the course of the next few years are designed to achieve that outcome.
Okay, Parliamentary Secretary for Schools, Kelvin Thomson, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Good to talk with you, David.
And thanks for your company on Saturday Agenda. Of course, we'll have the latest news coming up for you next. I'm David Lipson. Thanks for watching.